Welcome back to another episode of the MacRumors Show. For those of you who are creeping up on YouTube and watching the video, yes, I am in a completely different space than normal. But that's probably going to be the new normal for now while I transition from one studio to another. And you'll also notice that we have Hartley, who's with me as always, but we have a fantastic guest today. We have David Lewis. Hartley has been on a few times with your podcast, right? The Minus 16 podcast. I was on, honestly, I thought I was on like a few months ago, and it was in August. I feel like we just talked. It was in August. So time is just flying by.
March is past, yeah.
Yeah, so David, thank you so much for coming on. We're going to be primarily diving into audio today because you have quite an extensive background audio. Why don't you go ahead and tell us, because we're all just interested in your audio background, and then also be sure to let everyone know we're going to do this in the beginning of the show because I feel like after an hour's worth, we don't get to like have people go and visit your sites and what you do, your YouTube channel and all that. So go ahead, plug away.
The background was radio. I was in radio for just under a decade, presenting specialist music shows. So really rare. So it might be, you can't. There's some vinyl behind me over there. So I've got a real big collection of vinyl. So that was always a passion of mine. And then broadcasting, rather than going to London all the time, I built myself a broadcast studio. So I kind of got to know audio very well. And then I was thinking that would really help coming to YouTube, but of course that's all video. So all that knowledge kind of gets used, certainly on podcasts. But so my first passion was really with audio, and then video now has I'm becoming a camera bore now. I bought my first decent Canon camera, and so now I'm trying to learn as much as I can about cameras and lenses. I really want to buy a 24 1.4, 24 mil 1.4, but they are expensive. So that's kind of the story. And yes, I've been regularly posting on YouTube now for just under 18 months, which is my name, David Lewis, Talking Tech and Audio. I've got a website of the same, Talking Tech and Audio. And yeah, the videos tend to be a lot about Apple gear and then some audio-based tutorials or how-tos, that kind of thing. The dear evergreen content.
Hartley, have you dabbled in audio before in your past too? Do we have like 3 audio files here?
Only as a hobby. You know, I used to be interested in vinyl, but I had to put a stop to that one as it gets out of control. It gets very expensive. I had to stop myself before it went too far.
Very expensive. My wife gets mad every so often. A couple of vinyls show up on my doorstep, but it's like I grew up in a time where, you know, buying CDs and for a little bit cassettes was like, you know, I liked to look inside and like follow along, look at the artwork, the lyrics. Like that's how I listen to music, and you can't do that now when you're streaming, even though streaming is infinitely more useful. But like that's why I buy vinyl. It's my way of like supporting the artists and having like something physical to go along with it. But before we get into more audio related stuff with our audio expert, we have a couple of news headlines, and this one is something that has me super excited. Apple has made significant progress on non-invasive blood glucose monitoring technology. So finally, we've been hearing rumors about this for a long time now. And so, Hartley, does this get you amped up for the next generation Apple Watch? Although I don't know that it's going to be specifically coming in the Apple Watch Series 9, but it looks like it's on its way soon.
Yes, so I don't know if it will be, I don't know if there's a specific timeline for this, but it's got to be in the next few years.
Yeah.
I believe that what's happened here is this was something that Apple had a breakthrough with when it became sort of a tabletop-sized concept, but then it's been scaled down to become about the size of an iPhone, which is obviously still too big for an Apple Watch implementation. But once it can be miniaturized further, this is a real game changer for detecting early stages of diabetes. It could have some really interesting implications for diet management apps and for the whole sort of health kit ecosystem. Now, I know, David, you are quite new to the Apple Watch. So is this something that would interest you?
I was just going to ask.
Yeah, I was very late to Apple Watch. I only got my first one after the fall of last year when the Apple Watch 8 came out. And it was really weird. It was a slow grower. I kind of started wearing it. What's all the fuss about? It's one of those things, the more you wear it, the more it becomes part of your everyday kind of routine. And the thing is, being competitive, once then I got into Apple Fitness, they were very clever with their 3-month free trial, which in turn has led to me getting an Apple One bundle. So I just got the whole kit and caboodle now. But the way it just kind of, I think I said this to you before, Hartley, actually, it kind of gives you this gentle reminder that the speed and the tenure of the Apple Watch is different to iPhone. It kind of just encourages you more. It's a much more gentle approach. But, the way we sit too long at a desk working for too many hours, and it'll just say time to stand, or, it just seems to be a good way of prompting you just to monitor what you're doing a little bit better. And I'm a big fan of Apple Fitness now. I do work out to them every day. Me and Daryl, we're great friends.
I don't use Apple Fitness, so I'm guessing that's one of the instructors.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. He does a Pilates course. And again, I never thought I'd do Pilates. I thought that was just a case of standing still and stretching. But no, it works so well again with Apple Watch. And the more data you give it, of course, in whatever you're doing. And also their audio, funny enough, their audio series, The Time to Walk, love it. They've had some fantastic guests on that. They had Harrison Ford on a couple of weeks back. And they've had Shaka Khan on. And they've had all sorts of, Patti LaBelle was on. Some great guests. They're like 30, 40 minutes long. Just a narrative with them talking about their life. And then they pick 3 or 4 songs at the end. But, it's a great, again, another great motivation. Every Monday, there's a new episode of that comes down. It's just a good way to get out. I love going out for a walk. It's a great escape because, like it's all, I spend too long at a desk. So it's just a good escape. Get away from it all, switch off. I should have bought a watch with a data card, though, because it still means I have to take my phone with me, which is annoying. But
so how do you feel about these other health related like metrics that it can track? So being able to get your body temperature, hopefully it can do that now, but in very limited fashion. Hopefully down the line we can get something a little more, not specific to. Right now it's for like for women's cycles, and then it can detect over time if there's like a slight increase or change variation in your metrics there for your body temperature. But I know it can get dangerous if we had like a full-on thermometer on our wrist, but I would like some more insight into that. But blood pressure, and then now with the blood glucose monitoring for people with, potential diabetes, like that would be huge to be able to monitor all of those things from your watch.
I mean, if they could be the first to market with a non-invasive diabetes test, that's going to be a huge steal on the competition, isn't it? Massive. And wasn't there something going on this week over in the States that the Biden administration has permitted? It's the ECG app, isn't it? There's some patent law going on with another company that feel they developed it. And I think Biden has said, unless you get this sort, well, he's permitting, I think, the investigation to go further, at least. It was something I was writing about yesterday.
Yes, that's right. So it's one of those things where I wonder how far it's being overblown. You wonder whether this is really the government flexing their muscles amid sort of wider antitrust concerns and anti-competition concerns, and it's sort of like a little bit of a warning shot to Apple, because realistically no one really cares about a minor patent dispute. So I wonder how much it's being overplayed for other political purposes. But it just goes to show how sensitive these technologies are. And quite how innovative they are. And they are the subject of a lot of contention in terms of patent litigation, because these companies are up against it to develop these sorts of solutions. I mean, this will actually have enormous implications for companies that have very different uses to Apple. This would be Apple fully and aggressively moving into health technology in a way that it hasn't done quite so independently so far. So that will be very interesting to see exactly when they can do this and how it will work.
I mean, it's just to be able to do this without having to prick yourself for blood. I mean, it's just every person who has to do this on a regular basis dream, I would imagine, like to just not be able to do that. So I'm excited to see where that ends up. And hopefully it's sooner rather than later. But I mean, we have been talking about that. When did these rumors first start?
years ago.
2018 at least.
Long time ago. I mean, they were investing in startup companies that were developing these health technologies just in the hope that one of them would break through. And it looks like their own in-house solution is now getting there. So they're now pulling the money out of the startups and really going for it with this new solution.
Hey guys, just want to let you know that this episode of the MacRumors Show is sponsored by Magic Spoon. You know, growing up, cereal was one of the best parts of being a kid. But as I got older, I have to watch out for sugar and empty carbs. Magic Spoon has the amazing flavors that you love, but it's also high in protein and less sugar. Now, I was able to test out the variety pack, so that came with 4 flavors, which are cocoa, fruity, frosted, and peanut butter. And this pack has 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, and 4 to 5 net grams of carbs. It's only 140 calories a serving, and it's high in protein, has 0 grams of sugar, keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, and soy-free. And honestly, if I had to pick a favorite, I would probably go with cocoa and fruity as my top 2. I really loved peanut butter, but I only got a very limited taste of that because my kids ended up eating pretty much all of it. So go to magicspoon.com/Mac to grab a variety pack and try it today. And be sure to use our promo code MAC at checkout to save $5 off your order. And Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, it's backed with 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason, they'll refund you your money, no questions asked. Remember, get your next delicious bowl of high-protein cereal at magicspoon.com/Mac and use the code MAC to save $5 off. Thank you, Magic Spoon, for sponsoring this episode. Another headline that caught my attention is the sealed original iPhone sold for over $63,000 at auction. Now, I know a lot of us in, especially, tech YouTubers have a lot of those. Shout out Grid Studio for the amazing artwork with the broken down iPhones. Part of me wonders how much I can get for my original iPhone being deconstructed. Is that a little different than having it completely sealed and in working order? I guess so. But
didn't you still have an original HomePod?
I was listening to your
still
podcast completely sealed, so. Which is definitely, I'm guessing, I have not looked it up, but I'm guessing that took a hit when basically the exact same HomePod came back into our lives.
I know we're going to talk about that later, but everyone says that. Well, I think Hartley, you've got the original. I never listened or had the original, so I've only got the new one. But everyone's saying that original still sounded better. So maybe you haven't taken a hit on it. Maybe it's going to be a real niche value. You never know. Could be the kid's inheritance, yeah.
Does it sound better? I think that's up to a lot of people's opinions. I think they're both pretty close, but is it better in terms of not having a bunch of issues with it? I would think the new one is probably going to beat that one out a little bit. But who made the bid on this? Was that you, Hartley? $63,000?
No, I can't say it was, but I think it would be. While it would be a nice collector's piece, I'm not sure it would be that nice. I struggle to imagine really how you quantify that, because I wonder even how they check it. I mean, do they X-ray it? How do they know it's not just a brick inside when it's a sealed item? Because there have been cases of these things being faked.
Well, right, and look at the the image that's on our website there with the article. Is that the actual image of the box? Because that is the actual image. Because that seal looks real suspect to me, right? Like it looks like it's been resealed, and you can do that pretty easily. So I don't know. Especially, so it was devices. The original retail price was $599, so 105 times more expensive for a phone that I hope no one opens. Imagine if your kid gets into that and just opens it up. Look, Dad, new iPhone. Oh.
It's kind of like the fine wine idea, isn't it? There's these wines that people pay fortunes and fortunes for that will never get opened, and no one's absolutely sure in many cases if it's any good anyway. It's just got this reputation. The same with the iPhone.
Right. And then our last story that we're going to touch on before we get into our main topic is that we're all waiting for the extremely expensive headset that should be announced this year for AR VR, but it apparently seems to be in the works already that a cheaper second gen headset's already happening at Foxconn. And so with this one being in the range of $3,000 to $5,000, what are you expecting the cheaper one to be? Is this the one that Apple kind of pushes out to the masses and says, hey, we've made this one, here's your proof of concept, now here's a slightly cheaper version? Or is it much cheaper? I mean, think about a Meta Quest at what, $349, $399? Where are we going to be at with Apple stuff? I'll start with you, Hartley.
I think it will be significantly. It will be significantly cheaper, but I wouldn't think it will. It won't even remotely compete with what Meta is doing. This so-called cheaper headset will still be more expensive than most Macs. So you're
That's
still talking
insane.
that it's now looking to me like the first generation headset might be $5,000, and then this cheaper second generation maybe $2,000 or $3,000. That's the sort of difference. But I was initially thinking maybe I would be a customer of the first generation headset. I don't know about you, David, but I think maybe I need to look to the second one at earliest.
Well, I've learned a lot over the last couple of weeks. I started working with a renders artist this year, and it turns out he's an absolute diamond and a massive fan and geek of anything that's AR, VR. So I'll constantly get these WhatsApp messages coming through with new information. And yesterday, he sent me a whole spreadsheet. He's managed to find all the raw, or many of the raw materials that are being used, and he's costed them out what the cost is, and then added sort of 40 to 50% on, and he's coming out to $3,500. It was a full list I've got as well. It was a proper spreadsheet he sent me, and I've made a couple of videos about it. And yeah, I mean, it's going to be very high end for again, it's a niche product, but I think they almost want it to be at this stage, and I think that's an Apple way of going. And he came up with a name, by the way. He reckons it's going to, well, he slash now me, because I put it on the video title, thinks it's going to be called Apple Vision because it's taking on the aspect of television and it's trying to hone from television and give us that kind of entertainment feeling. So that's the title I've gone with, Apple Vision. We'll see, but
What
Well,
are
there's still
the
so many questions hanging
yeah?
over the device. I mean, we really know so little about it, considering it's just months away, which is fascinating. Considering that, for example, say with the iPhone 15 Pro, which we'll get to a little bit later, we have now seen real world images of that, and that is still what 7 months away at this point. So we are less than that away from the headset, and yet we have not seen a real world glimpse of it at all.
iPhones tend to leak pretty early, though. I mean, because for the most part, we kind of know, like, okay, this is, especially when there's a new redesign that happens, you kind of know it's going to stick to that aspect for a couple of years. So, like, you kind of have everything mostly fleshed out with a full new product like this. Like, we know a lot, but like you said, we also don't know a lot. It's just kind of like, it's a lot of speculation and a lot of substantiated rumors, and then a lot of things that were like, this could go in either direction. And I'm also still not convinced. While I personally think it's going to be at WWDC, I mean, would you be surprised if it gets pushed back again?
I would have thought, given the pace they started off this year with, I think there's going to be an awful long lull now. I can't see what they're going to do at spring. It's something I've given quite a lot of thought to, and all we know this year really is a headset, iPhone 15, Mac Pro, kind of the only headline things we're waiting for. So what would they do at spring? They're not going to do us, particularly with the Mac Pro the way it's looking now. It makes no sense to give that's not an event, is it? Not by itself. And so I think it's going to be a long lull now until WWDC, when I think your call's right. Probably that's what they're shouting for and hoping for with the headset. And then maybe later in the year, Mac Pro comes out with the new display that I know Hartley's written about, but maybe that's going to be later in the year. I think it's going to be a
Yeah,
patchy year, though. I really do.
it is looking like it will be a quieter year because, of course, in terms of Apple's development cycle, we are now looking at the products that were started to ramp up their development in about 2020 and 2021, when, of course, people were transitioning to work from home and Apple's supply chain was being wrecked, and they didn't know what they would be able to get hold of in a few years' time because of the supply chain difficulties that they were going through. And so it really is a result of that. I mean, this iPad Pro redesign that we have been waiting for, I really don't think that Apple intended, when they introduced that redesigned iPad Pro in 2018, to have that design persist well into what will be 2024. That's a very long time to have that sort of basic squared off 11-inch iPad Pro hanging around with very, very few changes. And so this year, yeah, that's basically it. We might see an iMac Pro. We might see, it's quite likely we'll see a 15-inch MacBook Air at some point. But it is quite slim pickings this year. Even things like the Apple Watch Series 9 are looking like quite small updates. So maybe that's why, thinking about the second generation headset and then OLED products next year, that things start to get a little bit more interesting.
Do we think it's going to be even less of an upgrade from Apple Watch Series 7 to Apple Watch Series 8? Because that upgrade
Could be.
was not
It
very
could be.
big.
I wouldn't be surprised. It will be chip. It will be the chip, really, because the chip is the
Yeah.
thing that has been the same across 3 generations. I mean, it's got the same product code. They just call it a different thing. It's a marketing exercise. So yeah, it will be a chip upgrade, because the chip is currently based on the A13 Bionic, which is from the iPhone 11. So it's overdue. If they give us something now that is based on probably the A15, that would be a significant update. Or maybe even if it was based on the A17, that would be quite impressive.
Yeah.
To really introduce some sort of efficiency saving. And if that through that efficiency saving, they could give you an enormous battery life boost, that would be enough. It would be bigger than really what we got last year.
That's true.
And again, the headset seems to be the source of all the problems for this year at Apple, because there's so many resources, human resources in particular, man hours being thrown at finally getting the headset out, that I think all the creative brains are honed in on one area. So again, I just think it's going to be very slim pickings this year.
Yes, I think that's exactly it. I think that we will see that most acutely when it comes to WWDC. I think we're not even going to hear all that much about iOS 17. It's going to just be get those other updates out of the way, and then here is everything about the headset. And then you won't even care about iOS 17 afterwards. Everyone's going to just, at least in our community, will just forget about it, because we will have this new thing that we need to dive into.
Well, I think they're behind on the development of iOS 17, aren't they? I think, again, because of just development time. I'm sure that they're running behind on everything just in this final push to get the headset out. They need to, I know they don't want to be first. They want to be best, as it were. But at some point, you know what it's like? You can spend too long perfecting at some point, you've got to let it fly, haven't you? You've just got to let it breathe and be.
And I think that's probably the evaluation they've made at this point. I mean, this headset was originally supposed to launch in 2020. It theoretically could have. If they would have had in-person events, if they would have been a little bit further along. And so I suppose now with the second generation headset in the supply chain, we know that it's going to be lighter. It's going to be a slightly slimmer design. It will have, I think it's something that there will be some battery changes with it as well, whether that means that the battery pack will be integrated, or it will be a smaller battery. There were those sorts of changes, and probably 3nm chips coming through at that point is where the headset starts to get interesting. And they're thinking, we've got to get the first gen out because we need to get this in the hands of developers. We've developed this product. And so it's just a case of just push it out at this point. I think that's where they are with it. It should have been a long time ago that we saw this thing.
I still don't understand the idea behind pulling all of your developers working on other projects like iOS 17 and iPadOS or macOS or wherever they're pulling them from to work on, okay, now you're doing the headset and the software for that, and then not filling that. Like, why wouldn't we just hire people to come in and specifically work on the headset and leave the others alone, so that we're not just like, okay, well, we created this whole new product space and there's a whole new operating system behind it. So everything else in theory is going to suffer now even more than it already is. I mean, how many tweets do I see about people complaining with all the bugs that are happening in iOS 16? Now we're just going to push out iOS 17 because they have to. And I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me, especially for a company like Apple. Like, I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe this is the year that they do address those bugs. So it could be an iOS 12 style release where they just say, we know that there are bugs. These updates, there aren't really new features, but we have spent this time to really polish our different sets of software. And I don't think that any of us would really complain too much if that was the case.
Do you guys think there's going to be quite a lot of press release items this year? Because again, talking to the Mac Pro, for instance, it sounds like really it's in the end going to be quite an iterative change. It's going to be, yes, using Apple Silicon, clearly, M2, possibly M3. But if what we're being led to believe is true, that it looks the same, it's not a very exciting product to release. And very few people are going to buy it now, particularly after the Mac Studio. So you kind of think that a lot of these things could be done via press release this year to keep the costs down, and then just focus on the big events, the really important core events to them this year.
I think that comes into it because Apple is not going to want to take the spotlight away from the headset. And the longer they go without having an event, and the longer they leave after having one about the headset, it really increases the level of interest and enthusiasm around the device. But having said that, I'm not so sure about that being the case for the Mac Pro, because if they do release the Mac Pro via press release, I think it would be an admission of failure. I think already there is a lot of concern in the community about how far this device will even really be recognizably a Mac Pro and not just a Mac Studio in the Mac Pro's casing. So if they push it out via press release and just say, yes, it's got an M2 Ultra chip, which we already know what to expect from the M2 Max. Maybe you can upgrade some storage with an SSD upgrade kit. Maybe there's some PCIe slots. That's it. If that's what they do, and they don't give us a song and dance about it, I think that would be it would. I think the lack of management around that would backfire a little bit.
Yeah, even less people will buy it.
Yes.
The Mac Studio has clearly kind of stolen its thunder for many people that would have bought a lower end Mac Pro are now more than happy with the performance of Mac Studio, which is in itself more than most of us need. So, because you've run the Mac Pro, haven't you, Dan?
I'm on the Mac Pro right now, but I haven't used this machine as like a daily, driver per se for when did the M1 Max MacBook Pro came out? I made that my daily because it was so good. Like the performance was even better than the Mac Pro that we had here. And then I currently use the Mac Studio when I am actually in my actual setup and everything. But right now my life is in shambles and everything is just everywhere. So bear with me as I eventually will make videos again. I was just telling Hartley earlier, I haven't done anything in a week in terms of making videos. I have been packing and moving and doing all of those things as one person can do. And it's amazing how much stuff you'll find out, David. If you keep going with this YouTube stuff, you will find out just how much stuff you will accumulate over time. You probably already have figured that out.
Oh, man, yes. When I started off on this merry little road, I kept on saying, right, I'm going to just use the iPhone as a camera. I'm not going to make any expenses here. Well, that was a lie. Yeah. Now I bought the Canon. I got a teleprompter, studio lights, had another tripod delivered yesterday. It just goes on and on.
Just wait till you start getting more cameras and more sets and try to
make it. That's right. So I need the B-roll then. That's right. I need the other camera. Yep.
So it becomes quite a bit of, it's like basically I moved an apartment from, like an apartment that I had from one area to another all by myself. And that was not a good time.
This is my kind of podcast studio, but my studio that I shoot at is a few miles away from here. And I was in there earlier this week and the guys downstairs are architects and they just went upstairs and they said, you've got so much more stuff than when we last looked. When does it stop? And I don't think that it's going to stop anytime soon.
It never will. But we'll move on to our main segment. It's going to be audio focused, as that's kind of your world. So let's just jump right into the main story, and that's the new colors for Beats Fits Pro. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. You can take your pick. We're gonna dive into the HomePod. We're gonna talk about AirPods Max. What would you like to start off with? Oh, and Apple Music, by the way.
Okay, yeah, actually, that's something I want to talk to you about because I know, again, having listened to you, as I always do, chaps, I know you're a big Spotify person. Well, day one, aren't you? And I just don't get Spotify. I really don't. For some reason, I still pay the subscription. But firstly, the thing I like about Apple Music, of course, is you can rip and upload your own music to listen to. True. So a lot of that vinyl, I will digitize. Then I can listen to it wherever I want. So that's one big thing. But everyone keeps telling me that the algorithm on Spotify is just wonderful and it keeps finding fantastic music for you.
How often are you using it, though?
Not very often.
Then it's not going to be very good. You have to... I mean, I don't think you need to be using it since 2009 like me, but you need to be using it for a while and eventually... it will figure out. I don't think it really needs to be that long, but I think like a couple months, like a solid couple months as your main music source, and you're listening to music as much as you do on Spotify, it comes up with incredible playlists. And there are playlists that are just crazy. The amount of custom playlists, not just like, yes, you can search whatever you want and there's public playlists from people that they've made, but the playlist that Spotify comes up with based off of what you listen to and then spans through like the early 2000s, 2010s, 1990s. Like you can go through decades and it picks your music and gives you, and it's amazing. And then there's genre play. I mean, like I know that Apple has some of this stuff, but I do use both of them, probably in the same vein that you use both as well. And I don't see it. And so that's the only reason why. There are things that I don't like about Spotify, but I just can't pull myself off of it. I thought maybe once like Tesla got the Apple Music app that I would have made the full switch, but I still haven't done it, and I don't know why. So
I guess most of the time I kind of open up Apple Music knowing who I'm going to listen to. And so from there, again, it goes back to, having had all that time in radio, I wake up on a certain day in the mood for a certain artist or a certain style of soul or whatever, or jazz. So I kind of know who I want to listen to. Maybe I'm not saying I've got the knowledge of an algorithm, but I kind of got enough history to know maybe what I want to listen to at any given time. So I don't rely so much on being served music. Perhaps that's the difference.
are you someone who listens to music album front to back, start to finish?
This morning, actually, I did put vinyl on. Yeah. And I know
Yeah.
Hartley's seen a couple of my tweets. When I write every morning, I tend to listen to vinyl, just
Okay.
part of what I do. So, yeah, I do tend to listen to albums start to finish. I don't just track hop.
Because we got kind of like different generations going on here, and I feel like like the younger,
gentle.
yeah. Well, I'm just hey, listen, Hartley is the youngest one, so let's just jump right in with Hartley,
there, shall we?
Let's just jump right in with Hartley and say, like, is your generation? I mean, I think I know the answer to this. Your generation is more of like, we're not listening to full-on albums. There's a reason why artists have completely pivoted towards just releasing singles more often and then throwing those into just an album. Like, you basically get the full album throughout the course of 14, 15 weeks to keep their content cycle and to keep their relevancy over time. That's their whole plan. I personally hate that. I think 2 singles and then I want an album and I want to be able to listen to it from start to finish. But I would love to know, Hartley, how do you digest music when you go to do that?
Well, I used to mainly shuffle music. I think that is a generational thing because you don't perhaps feel a need to even conceive of things in terms of albums, and that is how Spotify is ultimately built. It really does see things as individual tracks, whereas Apple Music is more for enthusiasts, where it's built on iTunes, and Apple Music encourages you to sort of curate and prune a library as you would with physical music, a little bit more so than with Spotify, where you just like a track and then it's sort of floating around nowhere, really. I recently tried Spotify for a little while. So
isn't it the worst in how you just described like artist and library management? You don't know where that like song goes. You have no idea.
Exactly. That's what I actually didn't like about it. And as David says, I like to just go and choose an artist and be able to just dive into that artist, which I feel Apple Music enables me to do. But more recently, I have started listening to albums a little bit more back to back. I tell you, if you're a person that doesn't do this, a great album to get why it can be a great experience to do that with would be the Love album by the Beatles, because it seamlessly transitions through. Every single track transitions, and so it's a really great experience to do that. And I think maybe in my case at least, you needed to hear it being done really well and really seamlessly, and to have a real sense of it not being an arbitrary thing, the track order. And I know for most artists it isn't an arbitrary thing, but it's hard to believe that from the outside a lot of the time. So it's nice if you can see a good example of it, I would say.
Lots of the interviews that I did in music radio were with jazz artists, and it inevitably came down to the order of tracks, and it's hugely important to them and to their label. And equally, talking of generational things, my daughter, who's only 25 and in the music industry, she works for a record label, hardly ever buys music. She just streams it. So she's kind of killing the very industry that she's in and trying to make a living from. And that says it all, because that generation, she is beginning to get vinyl now, although hasn't got a turntable, oddly. But at least I think maybe that generation will eventually pivot to wanting to own music again. I hope.
I think a lot of people buy vinyl and don't have a record player or any intentions on actually listening to it that way.
Such a shame.
It is a shame, but I'm also okay with it, because it's still a good way to support like artists, because they make way more on physical sales than they do streaming. And that's a whole entirely different argument for another time. But like, Even if that's what you want to do to collect it, that's cool. I mean, I highly encourage actually listening to it, but I'm guilty of buying some albums that I'm just like, I'm just going to buy it just to collect, and I have no intentions on actually listening to it on here. I like to listen to vinyl of like older stuff because I just think it was produced and sounds way better. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think, what we wanted to touch on with Apple Music, I don't use it, so you guys got to tell me, have there been any major app improvements? I personally really like the way Apple Music looks, how it's broken down, because I did start off with iTunes and having my own library, and I do miss that. But ultimately with Spotify, I kind of adopted the main like what you guys both do. I do shuffle a lot of playlists, a lot of songs that I really like. I just throw it all into one playlist that I have, or I will use Spotify's aggregated playlist and listen to music that way. But then once I find it and discover a new artist, I then go down into my old person brain is what I'm going to call it, and I do want to go and listen to their albums from start to finish, like that. So I do a little bit of both. But with you guys, like, have you noticed any improvements in Apple Music at all in the way you guys use it on a daily basis?
I know you talked about the interface of it quite a lot, Harley, haven't you? You've been disappointed with the way that the UI of Apple Music looks.
Yes. So I have a love-hate relationship with Apple Music because I think that some parts of the app, and especially moving to Spotify, has enabled me to appreciate some things that it does really well. Like I say, being able to just leaf through the albums that I have added to my library is a really nice basic thing that I don't think I was able to do that in Spotify. And it obviously just looks prettier with its use of artwork, etc. But I sort of wish that artwork was a little bit more front and center. It is that thing of it's hard to really capture album art that should be blown up on a physical record when it's a tiny little icon. And I think they could go further with that. I know they've done some great things around animated album art, which can be really nice if you get a classic album and they've sort of done some sort of perspective zoom or some sort of little animation. So I'd really like to see things like that being taken further. But I just think it's basic stuff like playlist sorting, being able to more easily delete stuff from your library. And obviously the algorithm is the main thing that does need work because Spotify is doing it better than Apple Music. I don't think either of them are perfect. And actually my experience is quite different to yours, David. I used Spotify for 48 hours. Within 48 hours, it knew me inside out. And I have quite an eclectic taste in music. So that was really...
I'll take that as my homework to take away from this podcast. I'll try and use Spotify.
Gotta jump back in on Spotify.
I'll give it. But
I did abandon it. To be fair, I did abandon it because it wasn't enough for me. Apple Music still overall gave a better experience. Not to mention things like spatial audio, and these other enhancements, and just the integration with the Apple ecosystem, which we all well, not you, Dan, but David and I at least.
Hey, no, I use. I don't know why I'm picking up my phone. I use Apple Music. Like, I actually pay for iTunes Match. I don't know if anybody else listening knows what that means, but I know you guys do. But it's specifically. Sorry if I can speak. It's specifically because of back in the day when I would download and rip music from places and, and old like CDs and things that honestly don't exist in some of the streaming. It's not a lot, but there are some things. I used to be in a band, for those who don't know. And, I have my own music and stuff that I've made on there. And so like being able to like take that and stream it is cool, and I kind of wish you could do that on Spotify. I don't even know if you can still do this anymore, but on Spotify you used to be able to at least if you had music locally on your computer, you could play that inside the Spotify app. But I have not
do that locally.
That's what I figured.
It doesn't sync, which is real drawback there.
The big bummer, yeah. Like if it was able to sync, so that would be awesome.
So if you being such a Spotify lover, then is the fact that the HomePods, for instance, don't natively play Spotify, is that a big bummer for you?
That sucks.
That sucks. Yeah.
I have to rely on AirPlay, and AirPlay, the lag between like pressing the pause button and like doing things like that really bums me out. And that's just kind of an AirPlay thing in general. I feel like it's not necessarily, I guess I don't really AirPlay a lot of Apple Music stuff. Does it do the same thing?
I have done, in the living room, using the phone. I've done that quite a lot. Again, with my own albums that aren't part of Apple Music. So I have done it. Just coming off topic very, very, very briefly, in the mention of Word, AirDrop. since the last month, I constantly have to restart Finder on my M1 Max.
Oh, is it doing the thing
Pro.
where you it freezes? Yeah, that happened to me.
This won't see it. Won't
You
see
have to
it.
relaunch Finder. So the workaround I've noticed it never does this if you drag and drop into the Finder like if you open up
Oh.
AirDrop in Finder and drag and
Yeah,
drop
yeah.
that way, it does not do that. But if you right click share using
That's
AirDrop,
what
it
we're
will
doing. Yep.
every I don't know 1 out of 4 times it will like just completely
Yeah.
not send
Sorry, I
anything,
didn't mean to cut
and
off
then
topic there, but
Finder
it's
is
been
broken.
driving me mad.
No. This is it's a bug. That's the only bug from Finder that I have encountered. I'm
Yeah,
sorry, with
I agree.
AirDrop. I know Hartley had one last time we talked about this that like it just doesn't send anything, right?
I don't know. It is a
mess.
strange but wonderful technology.
It's
All
weird
right.
because the older the devices, I've got an age-old iPad Mini that I use, and that works fine. Absolutely every time. That will receive and send AirDrop, no problem at all. But the newer
It's the
devices,
inconsistency of it, isn't it? That's what it
totally,
comes down to.
totally.
Well, real quick on Apple Music, one of the other things is Apple Music Classical. I mean, or Apple Classical, sorry. I know we've kind of beaten this down a lot. At this point, I don't really know what else to say about it besides when Apple releases it, it's going to be like that one TikTok where you hear like someone does something cool and then in the background you hear like, hooray. Like that's going to be my response. It's just like, hooray. And then I'm going to quickly move on because I'm not a big classical music fan. I do like classical music, but I don't know that I need a separate app to listen to the stuff that I would want to listen to. But do you guys have any thoughts about that? Hartley, do you know what's the rumor on that? Is it actually going to come now in 16.5? I know I saw that started to get tested.
Who knows? Maybe it is something we'll see at WWDC. But I'm really
boy.
interested from you, David. What do you feel about Apple Classical? What are you looking to see from not only Apple Music, the app itself, but how they're going in terms of curating a library, and what do you want to see them doing with how they're sort of reimagining how libraries should be built, and just the whole experience, really.
Yeah, I think the interface itself could do with a freshen up, a touch up kind of thing. It does feel a little bit dated, and even the way they try and say what you've recently uploaded, for me, and I'm pretty careful with how I go about my music libraries and so on, and it doesn't seem to go necessarily, they'll say recently added in 2021 or 2022 or something, but not all of the albums I know for sure were there. It's fine if I happen to buy them from Apple Music, but if I've ripped and put something in there myself, a CD here I'm talking about, so it is of the right format, not vinyl, I'm trying to sort of fudge onto them myself. Sometimes it just seems to get lost, and I full well know that I've got that album in there somewhere, because with CD, certainly, that was one of the first things I did. I used Apple Music to rip it, basically. It was the easiest way to do it. And that way that, I knew then I could just put the CD away and it was with me wherever. So I think they could do with making it look and feel fresher and easier to use, just less clunky, less buttons to press. And I did see there's meant to be some changes to Apple Podcasts, the app coming along, but I think it's only available with the beta testers at the moment. But apparently there's some more playlist functions and station functions coming in there, isn't there?
Well, again, I also do not use the podcast app. I use Apple, or I use Spotify for that, just because it's all one location. But I did test the beta recently, and some of the changes that I saw were pretty insignificant to me, but I am not a daily user. So like Hartley, I know you use them. Did you think that like
Not
the
anymore.
up next
Not
stuff?
anymore.
You don't use Apple, or you use Overcast, right?
Well, yes, I constantly end up torturing myself by switching between the two.
God.
And just
What's wrong with
wishing
you?
that Apple Podcasts would be. And I have like 3,000 podcasts waiting to listen to at a time. So it really is awful to have to constantly switch
3,000?
between them. Yeah, I never quite catch up.
I thought you only listened to our show. We don't have that many episodes.
Yeah, just keep them on loop.
No, he told me listen to mine too, so he didn't.
Well, and the minus 16 podcast, of course. Minus 16. How could we all forget? We have to be on that one too. Those are the only two worth listening.
Yeah, they're relevant. Yeah. So Overcast, I've always been tempted, but never actually tried it. Is it worth me dipping in?
If you are a podcast enthusiast and you like to have a little bit more control over things like notifications, like simple things like the ability to skip the beginning or end of a podcast by a certain amount of time and then leave that setting, different speed settings for different podcasts as well, and you can leave those set. different rules for how many episodes you want to download of recent things. So it is, if you're the sort of person that likes tinkering with different settings for individual podcasts so that you have a more seamless experience, it's really good. It is also much more stable. The sync is very, very good compared to what you get out of Apple Podcasts.
Is it good for discovery?
No.
Okay. Neither is any of the apps, honestly.
Apple Podcasts is not bad
pretty good
at discovery.
I'd say Spotify, I guess I don't really like look too hard at it, but like some of the suggestions that I get are like, I don't know.
I didn't like that in Spotify. When I did my 48 hours with Spotify, I was just thinking, I'm here for music. Why you keep putting podcasts in my face? I have my podcast player.
Really pushing front and center audiobooks and podcasts. And like neither one of those are things that I like. Stay in your lane, Spotify. You're really good at like suggesting music. Like why, if you're going to do that, you need to be better at it. I feel like the podcast suggestions are like the way I look at Apple suggesting music to me. It's not great.
Yeah, I like Hartley. I love podcasts. I listen to so many. They've become a real thing. And I haven't quite got 3,000 backed up, but it is one of those weekly chores to try and almost get through the podcast that I want to listen to. You kind of get, as you know, partly you get into a routine of such and such comes out on whatever day. And isn't it weird how you actually begin to look forward to, Thursday night, such and such a podcast is coming out. And with you guys, it's generally Friday that a podcast comes out, Friday morning. We get it here in the UK. And you just get used to the days of the week and the kind of almost the allotted time that you're going to listen to a certain podcast, I listen to you guys generally on a Saturday morning, just the way it goes.
See, I wonder if is that good or bad for us and other people who release podcasts on Fridays? Like, because I don't listen to podcasts during the weekend. I listen to it on my commute. Pretty much whenever I'm in the car is the only time I will listen to a podcast. But I also have kids, so they would not allow me to sit down. And I have young kids. Let me rephrase that. That would not allow me to sit down and do anything that I want to do for myself. So.
What speed do you both listen to your podcasts at? I'm curious.
Just at normal, 1x.
I actually like to slow it down even more. No, I'm just kidding. Honestly, I think it ruins it if I go faster. For me,
really?
I like to listen to the normal because like a lot of the ones that I listen to are mostly like comedy based, and so delivery is mega important.
Yes,
and so if I speed that up, it's not as funny. So
see, I listen at 2 to 3 times speed, but I just wondered if that was normal.
I think it is for
apparently not.
No, I think not 2 or 3 times speed. That's like
that's
listening to chipmunks.
All of them. If you speak quickly like I do, I don't. I think if anyone listening to this podcast on 3 times speed, that would be quite impressive.
Oh, there's no way anyone would be able to understand what I'm saying if they listen to. I try to slow myself down, but
the way to do it, if you want to listen to more podcasts, if you want to get through your queue of 3,000, this is how you do it. You gradually increase the speed. Each week you speed up a notch.
Hartley, you're not doing a good job. You're not doing a good enough job if you still have 3,000 backed up, or that means you have 6,000.
I keep adding more.
Or he's too busy. He's got too much work.
I need to see the list of podcasts.
Also
all right, well, let's move on because I do want to touch on a couple of other things.
Like hardware. Yeah,
hardware mostly. What do you have right now? Do you have an AirPods Max, David, or do you have the new HomePod? Do you have any of those two right now, or have you been able to use them?
In honor of coming on this podcast with you this week, I actually bought the.
Okay, perfect. So let's start with that.
I bought them. So all good with those. Not really a bad word to say. People said they were too heavy. No, although I do wear studio headphones a lot, so the weight to me wasn't an issue. I really like the sound. There's definitely an Apple signature that carries over from AirPod Pro 2. When I was A/B testing them to make a video about them, that's going to be my next video actually. There's definitely a sound signature there, but the one thing that really struck me with those is the active noise cancelling. At home, it's too much. I mean, not necessarily the most scientific test, but I've got a very, very loud cat. And she was screaming at the top of her voice at me, and I could not hear a thing without any music playing, just having it turned, the active noise cancelling turned on. It's, as I say, it doesn't really hold to my audio background that the cat is my way of testing. But it was. I've had to go into transparency mode. It was too much. But I'm a big fan of the noise cancelling, particularly when you're out That's why I bought AirPod Pro 2. Well, the AirPod Pro and AirPod Pro 2 last year was particularly for the noise cancelling. It's just something else, isn't it?
So what would be, if you had to, what would be your wish list for AirPods Max 2, I guess is probably what they'll call them.
Well, I don't know what you guys feel, but I've always wished that there was some form. I know they've got adaptive EQ, but I'm one of those old guys that would actually like some kind of control on my EQ myself. I would really love that. Because again, I know in the Spotify app, I think you've got certain parameters you can change the sound. Apple just don't ever want you to do that. They bake in their sound, and that's it. And I think is the one thing I'd really like to see change, just to have a little bit more control. Because again, if you're listening to something that's, say, really well recorded jazz from the 50s or something, it's got a totally different EQ and the way you want to listen to it, to something that's modern recording, Dolby Atmos or spatial, something really heavy on bass. I'd like a little bit more granular control myself. That would be a big wish for me.
Hartley,
well, that would make sense.
Yeah.
Seeing as it's more expensive, what were you going to say, Dan?
Oh, I was just going to ask you, like, is that something that you would do?
No.
Okay. See, I don't want to put you in a corner or label you as like someone who wouldn't care, but I feel like there are certain, like me and David would care about wanting to adjust that, but I feel like most people don't care, so that's why Apple just doesn't want you to do it.
I get concerned when I have more choice. It introduces more. I'm prone to decision fatigue, so I like it to not have to choose. But that's I accept if you're my perspective is this is a $550 pair of headphones, which are really not any better than competitors that are $200 cheaper than that, other than just their connectivity. And that means that if you're paying that much extra and it's not just an Apple tax, you really should be able to expect a little bit more granular control. I think that's a reasonable expectation for a device that is, even if I'm not calling them AirPods Pro Max or whatever, they are like a professionally targeted product ultimately. Maybe not professionally targeted, prosumer targeted, because I don't know if you can use them in an actual professional context.
Professionally priced though, and that's where that's where you're gonna want to be able to do that. Like there are so many headphones out there that I mean, and another thing is Apple is really good at giving us a good sound profile right out of the box. So I mean, we don't technically need to be able to adjust it, but some people want to, and some people do want to be able to adjust that. And I think that's where a lot of other headphones, like I always say out of the box, like AirPods Max are probably the best, but I can get a Sony, what is the name? WX1000 Mark 5s or whatever the new ones are. I can get those. I mean, out of the box, they sound great. I can get those to sound just as good or a little bit better than an AirPods Max, because if you kind of know what you're looking for and know what you're doing, you can fine tune and adjust the EQ, and that really does make a difference. So I think the easy fix for that is just give us the option in the app, but make it the same way for everybody else, or give us an option in settings. But if no one wants, if you don't seek it, Hartley, it shouldn't give you any like worry.
Anxiety.
Yeah, anxiety.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The interesting thing is, because I spend a lot of time in kind of these studio headphones, which are by design very neutral, very flat, and that's why I use them. But then when I jumped over to the AirPods Max, it was interesting that there wasn't any real heavy inclination in any. It's a very safe kind of middle of the ground sound they've gone for, which I think is probably their argument and defense for not giving us controls ourselves, because it doesn't really offend anybody. Last time I wore a pair of Beats, I mean, you're wearing Beats. There's no getting away from it. It just rocks you back. But so I think they've gone for a very safe signature, and it's one that I quite happen to like. But I think if you wanted your music a little bit more coloured and a little bit more flavour to it, heavier bass, I mean, I thought that the clarity of the sort of without, I don't know if I'm allowed to get too nerdy, but the
no, you can.
Can I? All right, I'll nerd off for a moment. So I found on the AirPods Max that the clarity in the mids was kind of a little bit cleaner, and I felt that the vocals just stood out a little bit more, say, than AirPods Pro 2. Marginal, but it was just a little bit of a cleaner sound in there, which probably is because they're over-the-ear headphones, so you've just got a better listening environment, and everything's bigger, clearly got more air, more space. But it's a nice profile.
Do you guys get upset that whenever you put your AirPods Max on, it has less features than your AirPods Pro 2? Or
I
just
do.
less updates? I do too. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
kind of where we're at. I mean, so I Hartley, refresh our memories with the next iteration. We're expecting all of those things to come not this year, but next year.
I don't like to say we're expecting them because it's
That's
not
true.
it's not rumored, but it would be insane if it did not have them. So
Right.
it should. The only thing that has been actively rumored is USB-C, which makes sense. You know, if we're getting a USB-C charging case for the other AirPods models in the not too distant future, certainly within the year at least after we get iPhone 15 models with USB-C. By the time we get to the next AirPods Max, that does make sense to have USB-C. But I would really like to see from the AirPods Pro, we could get skin detect sensors, we could get IPX water resistance, which obviously is, or I suppose it's just basic ingress protection because it's good for sweat resistance, which you would think would make sense when you're supposed to be working out in these things with your Fitness Plus. I'd like to see, obviously, the H2 chip to work with the headset.
Mm.
And then other things like a precision finding with U1. There's a whole load of things that we could take from the AirPods Pro.
I think when the H2 comes to Max with the adaptive transparency, that's going to be something special. Because I mean, that's a real sort of party trick of AirPods Pro 2. The way it sort of cuts out really loud sounds ever so quickly in live real time. So when that H2 chip gets put inside of AirPods Max, I think that's going to be a big step forward for them. A big step forward.
Do you find that noticeable, the adaptive transparency? Because I can never tell if it's working or if it's on.
Yes, only I guess again because I'm of that sort of mindset that kind of goes around outside almost field testing these things. If I'm going past something like a building site or something like that, and there's a sudden loud crash bang, you do notice that it cuts it out. It does work. I think noticeably enough. As long, again, for most people, they're going to put on some headphones and forget about them. But when you're actually listening to it and looking for it, or if you know what I mean, aware that should be happening, yeah, it does work. What I'm not so sold on is spatial. That really hasn't. You get obviously you get a more sound around your head, particularly in headphones, more than on the speaker. Yeah, I get that, but it's I don't know. Again, maybe it's just from the music background that I've been used to listening to. I don't know if spatial's necessarily aimed at me. And I like everything to do with moving audio forward. Always a good thing, but it just hasn't really gripped me yet.
I think it depends on how it's been mastered, how the track has been mastered, because it really seems to vary to me. A lot of music in my library is available in Dolby Atmos, and I leave it on. I just let the tracks come and go, and some of them really do sound dreadful, but some of them are excellent. There are some where you do have a real sense of the sound existing in 3D space, and it does give you a feeling as almost as though it's being played live, just because of how well it has been mastered. But I would say it is a minority of tracks that actually are able to do that, and the majority just they feel hollow. They've got a hollowness to them, they're slightly sort of echoey.
We've talked about this before. There's basically two versions of spatial audio tracks. Ones that were remixed but really weren't for spatial audio, and then ones that were actually created in the studio. So these would be newer songs where they were actually mixed and recorded and designed for spatial audio. And so I feel like that's why you get a lot of that variation when you're listening, because you're getting some of those songs that like Apple, hey, we've made a playlist of listen to all these older songs that have spatial audio, but they don't really have spatial audio. I mean, they probably remixed and engineered the best they could, but if you're not properly recording for that at the start, you're probably not going to notice it as much. One thing on the adaptive transparency, during testing for the AirPods Pro 2, I don't think I ever got it to like do its thing, and so I couldn't really comment on it. And then I think I tweeted like a month ago that I had a coffee shop and I thought my AirPods were like something was wrong with it, and then it finally clicked that adaptive transparency was working. I was like, why does it feel like it's sucking the noise out of one thing? And like, what's happening with my right? And it was like a loud like dish I was at a coffee shop, and so every once in a while it would just like start to happen where you hear it amplify just a little bit more on like one specific part of your head, or sometimes both. But for me, it was usually just one AirPod that would do that. And so it is kind of cool, but I also kind of wish I could turn that off and not have it, because I don't want that all the time.
That's the Apple way again, though, isn't it? What they give you is what you get. There were two design things I found on using the AirPod Max this week that I think they could do with working out. I don't know if you found when you put headphones on, your hands tend to rest on top, and I'm always pressing the crown. Whenever I put AirPod Max on, it's always doing something, which I find so annoying. And then the ear cups at the very bottom don't seem to flow around the bottom of your head, and it feels to me like some audio leak coming out there. They go straight down.
Yeah.
I just think they could
Well,
do
it's
tiny
part of
little
that
tweaks.
clamping. It's that clamping motion of them, which is one thing that I find to be a real shame. I wear glasses all the time as well, and so that is a bit annoying. And it really makes it particularly present. And other overhead headphones I've used really don't have the same issues with glasses because it doesn't squeeze your head in the same way that AirPods Max does. I think it's something that it was possibly just slightly overdone, and it's because it is like a solid steel clamp. There's no softness to it, and they do have an aggressiveness about them. Like they could almost be they're almost like Apple Watch Ultra style sort of. The way that they've imagined they wanted them to feel as these heavyweight things, and I think that's a bit of a shame because I wouldn't mind if they were plastic and they were lighter, and they were a bit gentler, or maybe some leather ear cups. That would be really nice to be able to have some options in that regard.
Do you guys wear yours away from home?
Yes, but mostly traveling on a plane.
I have done, but they are a pain to take with me. Because the smart case is terrible, so I have to use a different case, and it's big because you can't fold the cups in properly, and so I probably 90% of the time end up just taking AirPods Pro with me.
Real quick, because we're up against time, I do want to talk about the HomePod. Have you had a chance to dive into the new HomePod a little bit?
Yeah, I know Hartley knows that I wrote about this. I had the worst experience ever. I spent 8 hours with Apple support on the day that I was setting mine up. We could not get it. Apple TV just would not see it as a speaker, and neither did my iPhone. And it got to the point that he said, I think you got to totally flatten your phone. And I was like, come on, this can't be right. And in the end, 2 days after, I was very effusive in saying how wonderful this Apple support guy had been, spent every hour with me he could on that day. I'll be right back to you the next day with an answer. I've never heard from him since. So maybe my praise was misplaced. But the update, 16.1.3, is it? 16.2, the latest update, just magically fixed everything. So since then, I use it predominantly with 4K Apple TV. Really, really happy with it.
You do
really
the 2 stereo pair then?
No, I haven't got that much money spare yet. Once I'm monetized on YouTube, I'm gonna crank it up. Then I'll be getting that pair. I had a pair of minis.
Okay.
And I took the pair of minis off to put the HomePod in, and the sound, without question, is better on one HomePod as opposed to a pair of minis.
That's interesting, because that's an interesting conundrum, especially when that sort of brings you close to that price point. I can imagine a lot of people will be deciding, is it worth getting 2 minis and you get stereo, or just to go a little bit further and get one HomePod? And I would have thought off the top of my head that 2 minis in stereo was better. So it's interesting that you say that. Why is that? Is it just the depth and the texture of the sound?
Yeah, I mean, I'm Dan, I'm sure you're sort of the same as me. You think 2 speakers is always going to work better. You're always going to get separation, a left and a right. But because they're so much smaller and the sound is so way off the quality of a HomePod, just that one solitary HomePod. And again, it comes down to this thing, what Apple give you. I don't know if it is reading my room and giving me the best audio for that particular layout, but it's delivering really good sound, and the clarity of speech again. I keep coming back to speech. That's one of those things. It's very easy to tell, particularly when you're watching a movie or something, how much you're struggling to hear dialogue sometimes. The clarity of speech on that HomePod is really good. And I was worried, thinking taking a pair out, I must be a fool going from 2 to 1, but it's just better quality audio.
So do you think that compared to other speaker setups and other audio hardware, perhaps sort of things that you do use with your vinyl setup, how does the HomePod compare to those, not only in terms of how it sounds, but also value for money? Because this is still a very expensive speaker.
Well, we're sitting here talking about Apple products, so I think value for money kind of goes out, or has gone out the window a long time ago, right? I think we all know that we're paying too much for most of what we buy, but I would defend it that on the whole, it does its job well. And I had somebody comment on a video I made about it saying, it's not as good a quality as studio monitors. I know, but I've got studio monitors and they cost an awful lot more. And if I want to sit and listen to vinyl, I'll go into the studio and listen to very expensive studio monitors. But for sitting in a living room, I just want audio that sounds good. And I used to have a soundbar. I used to have a Sony soundbar that doesn't even compare. And it wasn't okay. It wasn't high end, but it wasn't the cheapest either. So I was really, because I missed out on HomePod originally, I was really interested to see what it was all about. And so far, apart from the setup, which was just one of those freak things, I've been really happy with what it's given me for good audio in the living room, and handoffs working. I love handoff. Again, back to podcasts. If I come in, I'm listening to something, to be able to just pass it over, that I love. So yeah, the experience I think is good.
I personally think that if you can, you got to get that second HomePod and then really put it in the stereo pair. And I think that becomes the new
That's when it
soundbar.
shines, isn't it?
It really does. And honestly, like, you know, that's it's $600, and I think there are a lot of sound bars that you can get. You know, the Sonos Beam is a pretty good competitor, but I still feel like 2 HomePods is a lot better.
I definitely will end up going that route.
And then you're kind of like, it's like right in the middle between like a moderate soundbar to like a high-end soundbar. It's right in the middle, and I think it mostly leans more towards the higher end soundbar in terms of like quality than it does the lower end. And so that's why I can justify the $600. And then you do have more multifunctional use cases with it. I mean, I know a lot of people can use soundbars to listen to music, but I mean, it doesn't shine as well as a HomePod would. And so when you add it in there, that's just my suggestion for those out there who are like, should I get 2 larger HomePods or am I good with 1? Personally, I think if you can do it, I would work towards that. But
no, it's on the list. It's definitely on the list. I'm sure second one will be on the shelf before the end of the year.
But yeah, I think that's kind of where we're going to have to end it. We're up against the time. I mean, we can sit here and talk about audio for ages. So we're going to have you come back. But again, let everybody know, Minus 16 Podcast, YouTube channel.
Minus
Go
16
ahead.
Podcast. Yep, it's got its own channel on YouTube. The main channel is Talking Tech and Audio. My name, David Lewis. You'll find it there. The next video should be up at the weekend, and it is about AirPod Max. Making a whole video about that. Right, every day. Got blogs on Medium. You can read me there, and on Twitter at DTalkingTech.
He does it all. I don't know how you do it and stay sane. That's a lot of work. No, it's great. David, thanks so much for coming on, man. Appreciate it.
Pleasure. Real good to catch up with you both again.